Hello London, we are ready for your vote.
Hello, I'm Stephen Perkins and this is Douzepois, the Eurovision podcast from the team behind Bingewatch. It's Monday 23rd of September 2024 and we are starting today's podcast with a few 2025 themed headlines. After keeping us guessing for an extra week, Iceland has confirmed their participation in next year's contest. Broadcaster RUV stated that the decision to participate is primarily based on the fact that it is an event that has great value in Icelandic society, is a source of joy and satisfaction for a large part of the population, and is a place for precious moments of family time all over the country. They have opened submissions for their Song Vakeppnin national final with a deadline set of 13th of October. RUV have also reported that the EBU is working on a number of changes, following several broadcasters criticising the handling of the 2024 contest, so we shall be watching avidly to see how those changes might manifest. Meanwhile, after internally selecting Marina Satti and Zari for the 2024 competition, Greek broadcaster ERT has announced that they will be selecting their 2025 representative with a national final. The 2025 contest will be the 20th anniversary of Greece's first and only victory with Helena Paparizou's My Number One, so keep your eyes peeled to see if they can find a suitable successor to bring a second victory home. Also, Ukraine is getting things underway for Vidbir, its own selection process, which is being overseen this year by 2006 representative and former guest on this podcast, Tina Carroll. A 10-song final will be held in February, with broadcaster Suspilna drawing up an initial shortlist of 20 before selecting the 9 songs that they will be advancing to the final, at which point the remaining songs will be revealed to the Ukrainian public and an online wildcard vote will be held to determine the song that secures the 10th spot in the final. Now, as of the time of recording, there is still something of a question mark over the future of the Netherlands in the Eurovision Song Contest, as Dutch broadcaster Avrotros continues to engage in discussions with the EBU over changes they want to see in the competition in 2025 and beyond. While they have been granted an extension until 1st of November to decide if they wish to participate next year, the general vibe seems to be that they are leaning towards not taking part if their requests can't be accommodated. So, this seemed like the perfect opportunity to take a look at the history of the Netherlands at the Eurovision Song Contest and what they've contributed to the competition over the years. Without wishing to sound too mercenary, before we get into the historical element, let's talk money, honey. While it's hard to find exact data on how much the various nations contribute to the EBU and the contest itself, it's generally thought that the Netherlands is one of the highest financial contributors outside of the Big Five countries. According to an article published by RTL in 2022, the Dutch public broadcasting organisation NPO pays the EBU €250,000 for the rights to broadcast the contest, while broadcaster Avrotros spends around the same on finding the act, creating the staging, and the cost of attending the competition itself. So, if an agreement cannot be reached this year, that's at least €250,000 that the EBU will be missing out on. Not a huge amount, but still a fairly sizable dent in their income that I would imagine they'd prefer to avoid, especially given the decline in the number of countries participating in the contest overall. We've gone from 43 countries in 2018 to 37 in 2024. You could even say we're approaching the point where it gets harder to justify having 2 semi-finals, given that we only eliminated 11 songs in total across the 2 semis this year. So, if terms cannot be agreed with Avrotros, it's both a financial and a reputational hit to the EBU. It's not really a good look for them to upset a member broadcaster so badly that they would rather pull out of the contest entirely than continue to work with them. And I think this is where history plays a part too. The Netherlands has been one of the most loyal, devoted Eurovision participants since the contest began, even when things weren't really going their way. So, let's take a little wander through history. The Netherlands was one of the 7 founding nations of Eurovision back in 1956, along with France, Switzerland, Germany, Belgium, Italy and Luxembourg. In the 68 years that the contest has been running, they've only sat out on 4 occasions. In 1985 and 1991, because the contest was held on the 4th of May in those years, and that's the Netherlands' National Remembrance Day. And in 1995 and 2002, due to poor results under the relegation system that was in operation at the time. After sending Yeti Pearl and Corrie Brokken to the first contest, when each nation had to submit 2 entries, though not necessarily 2 different singers, the Netherlands brought Corrie back for the 1957 contest with the sweeping love song Net als toen, or Just Like Back Then in English, which won the competition with 31 points, a decisive 14-point win over France in second place. The 1958 contest was held in Hilversum, making the Netherlands the first country to host the contest the year after winning, something which was not an established rule of the contest at the time. In fact, the United Kingdom had first refusal to stage the 1959 contest but had to decline for logistical reasons, and the Netherlands stepping up to host laid the groundwork for what has become one of the contest's most enduring traditions. Hoping that lightning might strike twice, Corrie represented the Netherlands for a third consecutive year, very much the Valentina Monetta of her era, in 1958 with Heel de Wereld, or All the World, a slightly more mournful but still delightfully cinematic ballad, but sadly she finished in 9th place, last, with just 1 point being awarded by Switzerland. Not to be discouraged, the Netherlands sent Teddy Shulton in 1959 with In Beetje, or A Little Bit, a more up-tempo, playful and flirtatious track which finished top of the table once again, making the Netherlands the first country to win the contest twice. They decided not to host in 1960, since they'd already hosted 2 years previously, and this time the United Kingdom did get the chance to host for the first time. Sadly, the Netherlands' fortunes began to take a bit of a dip that year, and by 1962 they had the dubious honour of Katinka by Die Spelbrekers receiving 0 points, the first time this had happened in the contest's history, though the shame may have been lessened somewhat by the fact that Austria, Belgium and Spain also got no points that year. Unfortunately, there was no 1959-style rebound for them the following year, as their entry in 1963, In Speeldus, or A Music Box by Annie Parman, also finished last with no points, making the Netherlands the first country to go 2 years without receiving a single point from another country, although Norway, Finland and Sweden also got no points that year, perhaps demonstrating that the expanding scope of the contest and the increasing number of entrants was making it harder to score any points at all under the voting system that was in place at the time. The Netherlands continued in the wilderness for several more years, with another last-place finish in 1968, before making a triumphant comeback of sorts in 1969, picking up their third win for Lenny Koer's Die Troubadour. Although, if you've been paying attention to your Eurovision lore, you'll know that that's one of the most infamous wins in the history of the contest, because 1969 is the year when the Netherlands, Spain, France and the United Kingdom all topped the leaderboard with 18 points, and as the contest did not have a tiebreaker policy in place at that time, all 4 were declared joint winners. As Spain and the United Kingdom had hosted the 2 previous years, France and the Netherlands were the only countries considered to host in 1970, with the Netherlands ultimately winning the ballot and getting to host for the second time, this time in Amsterdam. Despite the slightly awkward circumstances of their third win, it heralded an upturn in the Netherlands' fortunes at Eurovision. They finished 7th in the somewhat reduced field of 12 in 1970, with multiple countries boycotting that year over the 4 winners farrago, and managed to stay in the top 10 even as the number of participants returned to the normal higher levels, apart from a disappointing finish of 14th out of 17 countries for Ben Kramer in 1973, with the faintly sinister Die Oude Muzikant, or The Old Musician. But their 4th victory wasn't far away, and in 1975 Tietjen took the crown for the Netherlands once again with certified banger hippie anthem Ding a Dong, and the Netherlands hosted the 1976 contest in The Hague. In the aftermath, things started to go south a little bit once again, with a succession of mid-table placings until 1980, when Maggie McNeil, who'd finished 3rd in 1974 as one half of Malcolm McNeil with the uptempo I See a Star, returned to snatch 5th place with the sweeping ballad Amsterdam. That year also saw The Hague hosting the contest for the second time after Israel, who'd won at home in 1979, declined to host the contest for a second consecutive year, so the Netherlands stepped in, and this was to be their last hosting of the contest for 40 years. One other point of note about 1980 was that this was also the year that the nation turned over at least part of its selection process to the voting public, as Amsterdam was the final internally selected song until 2013, but we'll get to that presently. Things rolled on for the Netherlands in solid but unspectacular fashion for the next few years, finishing no higher than 5th and no lower than 16th in the competition until we get to 1994. By that point, of course, the competition had grown so large that it was in the business of relegating the lowest performing countries in each contest for a year to free up space for other countries to have a go. And unfortunately, 1994 saw the Netherlands' worst result since 1973, with syrupy ballad Waar is die Zon, or Where is the Sun, by Willeke Alberti finishing 23rd out of 25 countries with just 4 points, and the Netherlands was forced to sit out in 1995, the first time that they had unwittingly missed out on participating in Eurovision. They returned in 1996 when the setup had been altered slightly to include an audio-only, non-broadcast pre-qualifying round, which the Netherlands passed comfortably and ended up finishing in 7th place with the strident poppy Die Eerste Keer, or The First Time, performed by the slightly little enlarged duo of Maxine and Franklin Brown. This triumph was a little short-lived though, and the Netherlands' next effort, the Bond theme-esque Niemand heeft nog tijd, or Nobody Has Time Anymore, by the excellently named all-female quintet Mrs. Einstein, didn't deliver on its obvious promise and finished joint 22nd out of 25 alongside Switzerland with just 5 points. There is an argument to be made that this entry was ever so slightly ahead of its time, because 1997 was of course the last year before the switch to an all-televote voting system, and I think under that it probably would have been much more successful. Thankfully, the relegation system had been tweaked by this point, and their good form in 1993 and 1996 kept the Netherlands in the running for the contest in the UK in 1998, where Hemel en Aarde, or Heaven and Earth, by Ed Cilia, perhaps now best known as one of the contest's hosts in Rotterdam in 2021, finished 4th, looking like a genuine contender to win for most of the voting and ending up only 22 points behind the winner. The Netherlands netted another top 10 finish the following year, but things gradually started to unravel after that, and 2005 was where the problems really started to be felt. The year before, the semi-final system had been introduced to manage the number of countries competing, and despite qualifying for the final in 6th place, Without You by Reunion fared less well on Saturday night, finishing in 20th place in the grand final. As disappointing as that result may have seemed, it would prove to be the Netherlands' high point for almost a decade, as they went on a non-qualifying spree that would make even Denmark wince, failing to reach the final from 2005 to 2012. By 2013, broadcaster Tros clearly felt the situation was unsustainable and decided to change their approach, opting to select both the artist and song internally. They went with established artist Anouk, who had previously expressed an interest in doing Eurovision but not in going through the rigmarole of a national final, and her dour but compelling love song Birds provided the change in fortune that the nation so desperately needed, sailing through the semi-finals, qualifying for the final for the first time in 8 years, and finishing in 9th place. Anouk's success clearly reignited something in the Netherlands, both proving to the country that they could still deliver at Eurovision and proving to the Dutch music industry that Eurovision wasn't necessarily a career death knell. The following year, they scored their best result in almost 40 years when the Common Linnets finished as runners-up with the beautiful, soft country ballad Calm After the Storm. However, a misstep followed in 2015 as Trintje Oosterhuis failed to qualify for the final with Walk Along, and also picked up the Barbara Dex Award for the worst dressed contestant at the contest. Perhaps sensing that they had found a niche that worked, and that few other countries were exploring, the Netherlands entered 2 more country songs in the next 3 years, with Douwe Bob's Slow Down in 2016, and Common Linnet singer Waylon returning as a soloist in 2018 with Outlaw in them, albeit with neither quite delivering the same impact as Calm After the Storm. But it was a Common Linnet's influence of a different kind that propelled them back to the top of the contest for the first time in over 4 decades. Step forward Duncan Lawrence, who competed on The Voice of Holland in 2014 with Common Linnet singer Ilse de Lange as his coach. He was eliminated in the semi-finals of the show, but Ilse kept in touch with him, and also with the Netherlands Eurovision delegation, nominating Duncan to represent his country in 2019 and very much mentoring him throughout the process. And of course he won in Tel Aviv with the piano-led ballad Arcade. Duncan, of course, had the rare honour of being the only Eurovision winner to reign for a 2-year period due to the cancellation of the 2020 contest. And it's also interesting to trace the little line of influence over the previous 7 years of the contest. Ilse de Lange said that she was opposed to taking part in Eurovision at all until Anouk restored the contest's credibility, and without Ilse, there wouldn't have been Duncan Lawrence or that 5th Dutch victory. Next, we all of us apart from Australia due to COVID restrictions, decamped to Rotterdam in 2021, where the Netherlands suffered the fairly modern problem of hosting nations getting overlooked, with Django Macroy's Birth of a New Age finishing in 23rd place. S10 just missed out on the top 10 in 2022 with De Diepte, or The Depth, the first Dutch language entry in 12 years, and then Mia Nicolai and Dion Cooper failed to reach the final at all in 2023 with Burning Daylight, an entry that received a fair amount of criticism for being a squandered opportunity, with poor staging and artists who didn't really deliver live in terms of vocals or even clicking together on stage, a big problem when your track is a swooning ballad that requires chemistry and buy-in from the audience. Which, of course, brings us to 2024 and the big hope for a triumphant comeback from Joost Klein and Oilo Papa, a song that I think is very much the definition of an acquired taste, and I'm sorry to say that everything about this performance still kind of makes my teeth itch, but it was nonetheless expected to do very well at Eurovision, until the backstage incident that saw Joost disqualified from Saturday's grand final. The EBU's handling of that event has, I think we can safely say, sparked a fair amount of distrust from the Netherlands and Avrotros, and a feeling that they were treated unfairly in the competition, so, understandably, they are seeking reassurances about what the future looks like, and whether they feel it's worth them spending time and money on continuing to be a part of it. With the Netherlands' extended deadline for confirming their participation in 2025 now on 1st of November, it's likely to be at least a month before we discover whether they'll be joining us in Basel next year. But in the event that Joost's disqualification sparks a long-term withdrawal from the contest, like Italy did in the early 90s, it would definitely be the contest's loss, because if we've learned nothing else from this potted history, it's that the Netherlands is incredibly devoted to Eurovision, puts the work in, and loves a good comeback story. And while I'd absolutely understand if they decided not to return, I hope they can find a way to reach some kind of mutually acceptable resolution with the EBU. That's it for now. All being well, I'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter at bingewatch_pod or me personally at Stephen Perkins. And please do subscribe to Douzepois on your podcast platform of preference, and perhaps also leave us a kind review if you feel that we deserve one. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, good night Europe and good morning Australia.